Okay, so I've been asked by some people about the basics of the technique of modeling, and well, this is my technique, so I suppose there's quite a few other ways to do it. But yeah, so my technique is the following. I use raw cowhide. Raw in the sense that it doesn't have any kind of finish on the top. It's not oiled. It doesn't have any color either, although sometimes you can find pieces that are actually raw and they've got some color, they've been stained somehow. But in general it's going to be, well, this color, white as possible. So we want a recent leather in the sense that it hasn't been hanging around the warehouse for a couple of months. We want something that's pretty recent, especially where I am in Spain. That's important because it's pretty hot here, so leather dries out, so we want something that's more or less recent, it's been tanned in the last 2 months, more or less. It has to be absolutely porous on the surface, so it doesn't absorbs completely the water. Water sinks in, as you can see. So the pore is completely open. There's absolutely nothing that avoids the liquid sinking in. Generally, I'm going to use a 1.6 to 2.2 millimeter thickness, because I want something pretty consistent, because I'm not going to be working with a mold. There's going to be freehand modeling, so I want something pretty consistent that's going to keep the shape when I start stretching it. It should be also on the back side, on the flesh side, should be as white as possible too, so that the sun hasn't been in the sun or in a very hot place or anything like that. And yeah, so basically that's it's pretty difficult to really get the exact leather. Leathers stretch, some stretch more than others, it depends. It could come from the same factory, the same process, the same packet, and one will stretch and the other will stretch less. So it's pretty difficult to see which actually works and which doesn't. In general, if you get something similar with the same packet, well, it could be a variation between one and another, but it's not going to vary too much. So yeah, it's also pretty light. It's not a heavy leather. That's another point that we should consider. The tanning process the result has been pretty light. The leather's quite kind of nearly a bit kind of cartony, light. And also, well, on the side, when you cut it through, it should be white. It shouldn't have dried in on the side either. Normally it dries from the back towards the hair side. So sometimes you can see that it's darker in some places, but it should be as white as possible. That's important. Then I'm going to use lukewarm water. It's not very hot, but not very cold. And so it's lukewarm. I'm going to put the leather in, and the normal result would, if it's the correct leather, it's going to start bubbling. So that's a kind of sign that it's the right stuff we're working with. This has bubbled a little bit in the beginning, hasn't bubbled too much, but it is absorbing. I can see that it's swelling. So normally I leave it in the water for about 15 minutes to half an hour. Then I'm going to put it in a plastic bag, sealed plastic bag. So, and if possible, I'm going to leave it overnight so it cases well, it saturates the leather, the water sinks all the way through the leather, so it's nice and soft. Actually now I'm feeling this piece. I just bought this hide yesterday. Well, by the way, this is cowhide. As I said, in particular, this one is a 1.8 millimeter, which is ideal. and I can see that it's gone really soft. It's saturated. Just that minute I put it in, it's really got nice. So this is going to stretch quite a lot. Just with my finger you can stretch it. So when I start whacking it with the different tools, it's going to stretch quite nicely, I think. And yeah, so that would be the leather. The leather has to be, as I say, recent, nice, and has to absorb the liquid properly. And then the tools I'm going to use, so once I've put it in the plastic bag, you can't leave it all night, or just, at least 2 hours in the plastic bag so it saturates in there. Then I'm going to take it out and leave it for a while so the surplus water that's on the top sinks into, and then I'm going to start working. You can see that the water actually comes out when you stretch it, so this is going to be good. This is going to be a good piece. The tools I use, basically they're I use the common modeling tools for the detail, rounds, spoon-shaped tools. I also use some heavy wooden tools to get the big volumes, or lighter ones, so I can use to hit the leather in the beginning, at least, so when it's wet. When it's just been taken out of the bag, that's when it's really elastic, so that's why I'm going to get the big volumes at the beginning. I'm also going to use bone tools, horn for stretching. This also for getting the flat parts, the angles. That process is a bit further on. That's when it's a bit drier. So that comes to the next most important point with modeling, which is the drying sequence. So when you just wet it, when you just take it out of the bag, it's going to be really elastic. So this is going to really stretch a lot. I mean, you're going to see stretching just with my finger. Little by little, it's going to start drying, and as you start drying, you can start doing the details. So in the beginning, we're going to get the big volume. Big volumes. If we're doing a mask, for example, we're going to start with the nose. Let's get this out of the way. And to whack it in, I use some kind of basic molds, basic matrix, so you can put the leather on and hit it in. It can be this is a PVC tube, but they come in different sizes, different diameters, so really you can get quite a few different sizes. Wooden base can also work pretty well. So the actual the part of the top can be like this. It can be cut sideways, or you can be flat. Depends what you want to do. The ones that I cut sideways, normally I use for the noses, because we're going to see now that it kind of this, when you hit it in, it's going to form into a shape that's pretty more or less the shape of a nose. Is going to get a kind of slightly triangular shape. So here's a piece that's been hanging around the workshop for quite a time. So I'm just going to use I wet it a few minutes ago. So I took it out of the bag a few minutes ago. It's been wet all night. It's really swollen, this, so it should get a nice, good volume. There's a kind of slight contradiction really with this, because if the leather is really, really, really elastic and very, very soft, the problem with that is that it's going to take longer to dry, and it might not keep the shapes that we're going to start creating as well. If the leather's a bit harder, it's going to stretch less, but it's going to keep the shapes better. So in general, I would vote for a leather that is a bit harder, because always if you put that extra force into it, hit it just a bit stronger, it's going to stretch without breaking. That's the idea, obviously. We don't want it to to crackle or anything on the hair side. We want it to keep nice and compact. So let's have a look, just so let's see how this stretches. I'm going to put it with the flesh side up. Just going to do a slight, see if this stretches. I'm going to use I can use any kind of hammer. I'm going to use this big one to begin with. And let's just see if it stretches. I'm going to try to hold the sides. We can also fix this with we can secure it so it doesn't move so much. I'm not going to do it with this one, but you can do that. So let's just have a look if it's stretched. So there you can see a bit, it's already creating a kind of nose, partially nose shape. And it's stretched for quite a lot. I mean, we've got maybe a 3 centimeter volume there. So it's stretching quite nicely. It's really uneven, the surface of this piece in particular. That doesn't really matter because we can always smooth that out. So once we got to that point, we're going to start working at it. So maybe we want it to, the nose to work in this direction. We're going to start stretching it in that direction. So this is a bit different from embossing in the sense that we're going to use both hands with this process. One is going to kind of secure the parts that we don't want to stretch, and we're going to stretch the rest with a tool, either this tool, bone tool, or a horn, or in a modeling tool. So you can use any of those to stretch it out. You can also use wooden tools too. These are kind of balls, different size balls. You can use those too. And well, this piece is really wet, so as you see that, it's a bit frustrating sometimes because it kind of sinks. You got the nice volume, then you start working at it and it sinks in. But the thing is that we've already stretched it, so that will go back to its position if we just lift it up a bit from the bottom. Obviously this is really wet, this piece, so you can't really do much with it until it dries out a bit. You can start deciding where you're going to put the different parts, the eyebrow, the cheeks, the lips. You can start stretching all that out a bit, but until it's a little bit dry, it's pretty complicated to work. But basically that's the technique. So once we've got the volume, we can start doing the flat surfaces, stretching out parts that we want. We can start working with knives too if we want to do teeth and stuff, and with the eyes. So basically it's an embossing process. But the difference maybe is that when we haven't got any mold underneath, we're not using any kind of plasticine or modeling paste so we're working in the air. This makes it a bit more difficult. We have to use both hands, as I said before. For example, when I get the nostrils, we'll use our fingers to work with that, so we can work into the side of so we stretch this part and the fingers would be the one that are pressing in the other direction, so we'd get the depth of the nostrils. So that's what basically these kind of things are what we're going to start seeing in the tutorials. We're doing a online course that's going to be dedicated to volume in general. We're going to see all these little kind of tips that help with the modeling process. There's a lot of it is just practice, obviously, and discovering it for oneself. But there's some things that obviously that are important that will be transmitted in the tutorials. So as I say, we're going to do volume in general. All kinds of things related to volume. We're going to start with working with a mold, in the sense that the first process is going to actually we're going to see how to make a mold, although it's the way I make molds. This is a piece that's obviously I've used a dry paste, a kind of clay that dries without you don't have to use an oven, so it dries in the air. Then you sandpaper it down and give it some kind of varnish, so it doesn't, it's not porous. So obviously we're going to work with a wet leather, and then we're going to see how you emboss all the piece over the mold. So this is pretty straightforward. We're going to see how we close the nose, how we do the side parts, closing these. This is an anatomical mask, so that would be one part of the course, which is going to be a 3 months course. Which is, because there's 2 groups that are already functioning. There's going to be another group mid-March. We're going to start another group. There's one group in English speaking, another group that's Spanish speaking. On the 15th, we're going to start an English speaking group. And so the actual course is going to be film tutorials. There's going to be a weekly film tutorial, which I'm going to send to each participant. There's going to be a online chat once a week too. So we're going to look for the correct time change, because there'll be some people that are abroad, obviously, overseas. So we're going to get correct time zone and time so the people abroad can adapt to. There's also going to be a WhatsApp group that's going to be just for consulting particular things in the moment, sharing pictures of what we're doing. I'm going to send you little tips and stuff to help with the process. And there's also a streaming that we're going to do, Facebook streaming that we're doing on Saturday mornings at 11. So if anybody wants to join into that, will you just send me a message, one of these friendship things, and to Michael Nadeau, that's Nadeau, and you can join in with the streaming. So that's the working with the mold. What else we're going to do? We're going to start off with something a bit simpler, with molding in circular shapes. We're going to mold round shapes. Basically, all the process, all the possibilities that we have with molds. So that's one part of the course. The other part of the course is going to be basically laminated leather. It's going to do boxes. Well, it's going to end up doing boxes. We're going to end up doing boxes and stuff. Consistent boxes. But we're going to start off with smaller things, like things that you can use. Also, you could use on a box or on a bag. This is laminated leather, working in different shapes and sizes. What I forgot to mention, just going back to the mold, working with the mold, we're going to do smaller things too, working over natural molds, like, this is a walnut, for example. We're going to do stuff like that. We're also going to do horns, the process to do horns, solid, compact horns. This is completely compact. You see these? So that's also, that'll be the working with the mold. Back to the lamination, the laminated leather. So yeah, we're going to do all kinds of small pieces. Well, basically we're going to see the technique, and then that's up to the imagination of the participants what you do with it. But we're going to see the technique to laminate leather and work at it. We'll also do some carving, carving into also the laminated leather, working different pieces. Well, these are in process, most of these. Well, these are finished. These two are finished, but this one's in process. That's also in process and needs another layer of finish on it. This one's in process, but you can see we're going to be working with layers of leather. So that's going to be another part. That's the other part, the laminated leather, which, as I say, is going to end up. We're going to end up doing solid, compact boxes. And finally, what the kind of star of the course is the modeling. No, the modeling with the technique that I use for modeling, which, as I just say, we can use any base. I've just emptied. This is actually an ashtray, but we could use anything. I mean, this is. We can use anything as a mold. That's the kind of fun part about it. Just getting in, so you've got volume. So once we've got the volumes, then we can start working at the volumes. We can start shaping it. This, if the leather is good, it's not going to need any kind of hardening process either. I'm going to talk about hardening processes, the way we can harden it if it's too. For example, this one ended up being. I wanted this effect. I wanted the effect of the kind of crinkles in the leather, different wrinkles and stuff. So I used a very soft, as you can see here, it's very soft leather. But then I hardened it once I worked at it. So as I said before, so you can get really good volumes here. Look at that nose. I mean, that's not cut in anyway. That's just leather stretched out. So you can get really good volumes, but it's not going to be very consistent. Once it dries, it's going to stay like that. But if you start moving it around or putting it on and stuff or whatever, it's going to deform. So that in this piece in particular, I hardened it. I did a hardened process inside, so it keeps the shape. But if you get a good, nice leather with the correct thickness, that's not going to be necessary. It's just that the actual leather is going to keep up the shape, like this one. This doesn't have any finish, anything. I haven't hardened it anyway, and it's really consistent. I mean, it's very difficult to deform. So well, yeah. So we're going to work, as I say, we're going to do all the modeling stuff, and we're going to start working at different effects you can do on the surface. Sometimes we can use some kind of blueprint, a pattern, but in general this technique doesn't have much of a pattern. The general basic principle is that always cut more than you need, because you never know. That's the basic principle. So yeah, so we're going to learn how to do all these, at least the way I do it, all the effects you can do on the surface of the leather. In the modeling part, we're also going to see puppets, which is my favorite. I love puppets. So we're going to do some puppets, which is the same technique. It's a modeling technique. And one of the pieces is going to be this, which is just a mirror. So we can put it to a use, in the sense that it doesn't just have to be decorative. You can also make pieces that have some kind of purpose. In this case, it's what you see, a mirror. And in general, we're going to see all the techniques related to modeling leather. Modeling using a mold also, and lamination. Those are the three parts. And it's a 3-month course. We're going to have a weekly, as I say, weekly chat, weekly tutorials, weekly contact, permanent contact. We saw that it's a bit difficult just to do a class online. So the chat's really going to be, once you've got the tutorial, you can start working at home, and doubts and questions, etc., through WhatsApp and in the chat. In the chat, I'm also going to do some kind of small demonstrations that can help with the process, but basically the work which is going to be at home, and with each one is in their workshop or working on, and when you come across a problem, where you can consult it. And if you want to contact to find out more about that, well, you can write to info at Querox, which is CUEROX.es. Okay, that's info Querox.es. And there's also the web page, which is Querox, CUEROX.es, or .es. And Yeah, so you can, if you want more information about the payments and how the prices, and you want a more detailed description of the contents, well, just send me a message to either that, or you can do it through WhatsApp too. So my telephone 644312346. You can also do it through my Facebook, through the Facebook page. This is Michael Nadeau. This is Michael Nadeau, yeah. So yeah, there's quite a few ways you can contact if you want more information. So okay, well, take care. Ciao.